button. And we'll go ahead and start our presentation. So welcome to today's TechRanch VO Weekly. We'll be talking about innovating the vulnerables out of harm's way. We are in the Venture Outfitter. Venture Outfitter is the new program that TechRanch started about a year ago in response to what is happening on, most of our business is international these days, crosses some country boundary. And so we needed to come up with a digital way of, instead of just having our physical space that many of you come to in the past, we actually now use the Venture Outfitter brand name to say this way of connecting across different borders and stuff like that. And although I'm sure that I've gotten to hang out with many of you in Austin, we'll be doing a lot more stuff on our community site right here. So today's an interesting conversation about innovating the vulnerable out of harm's way. And it's a community conversation. What does it mean to say a community conversation? Innovation is a social construct. Let me actually dig in a little bit about that. First off, we have this idea of the inventor, the person who comes up with a new idea, but that is invention. Innovation is taking that invention and having it go across many, many different places. Like, it doesn't really matter from a product standpoint if your invention doesn't actually get used a lot of different places. And so you might say that invention is where you started it, or innovation is where it grows. One of my friends and advisors would actually say it this way. He would say, invention is a flower, innovation is a weed. Okay, so now what do we mean with regard to the conversation? The thing that we want to do is we're going to have a social conversation today. This is not a normal panel. It's not about just coming up with, point versus counterpoint, which is typically the American style for, certain types of programs. This is more of, we're going to have a conversation. Innovation is a social connection. It's like it happens from awareness across many different minds. So we'll hear from the community, and part of the thing about it is to really dig in on that from the community. I presently am in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. I've been really enjoying my time here. Everything from getting to see the first church, the first Catholic church in the Americas, to some of the other beautiful sites here and the people and things like that. Been interacting with some of the startups that are based here in Santo Domingo and other parts of the Dominican Republic. And I'll have, in a few weeks, we're gonna actually have a couple different people who are gonna join us to talk about the local culture, the local startup scene, and how they can be a part of the conversation. We're already teasing out some connections between Dominican Republic, the United States, and Mexico. And I'll tell you more about that in coming weeks. Real quick, I don't talk a lot about the service offerings for TechRanch. The main thing I want to make sure you know, and whether you're watching the video or you're on the live feed right now, that we have programs that are available for free. You can just get involved in the community campfire VO weekly calls and join us for free. And we'll have a URL at the very end of this that actually tells you where to go, but it's techranch.mn.co. And you can get involved in the community for free. Now, for those of the entrepreneurs that want the first access point into mentorship in our Venture Essentials program, and all the different the free offers that we can actually share from different companies and different events, that cost us a little bit of effort to pull all those different pieces together. So there is a small charge to be at the network level. Join us, and if you have any questions, you can just send me or the team an email, and we'll make sure we get you connected in. So one of our sponsors that makes today's program possible is the co-working location. Linda Blackman, one of our long-term TechRanch entrepreneurs, she actually bought out the TechRanch site and called it DuoWorks. And so if you're looking for a physical space, or if you're international and you need a mail point of presence to actually receive mail in the United States, or if you want a full office, they have all the above. They've got special offers. The offer for the mailbox is less expensive than $200 a month, but that gives you kind of an idea of some of the specials that they have. And thank you for them being one of our sponsors. It makes this program possible. So the conversation started a few weeks ago, actually on a VO weekly call, one of these calls, where we just had, I actually, this is the slide that I said, can we innovate people out of harm's way? And there's a bunch of different examples in TechRanch's history about building what we were calling an Immigration Innovation Center in Chihuahua, Mexico. I had actually signed an MOU with the state of Chihuahua to do some interesting things. I'm like, hey, let's just see what Innovation's point is about this. Obviously, what happened then was 2020 happened. The virus really got out of hand, and a lot of the stuff that we're working on had to be put on hold. Gave us a chance to innovate in different ways, but really that's what's driving today's statement about having this conversation. And I was really impressed with what the community actually came up with in that previous interaction. And so I think this is going to be one of the themes that we're going to work on, because a lot of times people actually say, well, we really can't do anything there. And kind of a lot of times the situations get ignored versus actually solved. Entrepreneurs that know what a blue ocean versus a red ocean is, that means that where you don't have competition, recognize that a lot of times when you come up with a new product, you go to the unserved and the non-served, underserved or non-served part of a market, and you enter the market there, and then you ride the market all the way up to everywhere else. So that's where we're both looking at it from a standpoint of humanitarian wise. How is it that we can actually take advantage of these kind of conversations, and also drive business that actually helps people at the most and that are most vulnerable out of all of us. So immigration is not a new thing. This is a 1932 picture of a Texas tenant farmer who migrated to California after the crash. If you know that I'm a multi-generational Texan, at least 5 that we know of, 5 generations. I'm like, why would they move to California? Well, this is just it's just been part of our history. And so when we talked about Kabul's airport a few weeks ago, and I had gotten a call from one of the gentlemen that will be on the program today, he said, hey, how do we actually get people, that are 3 days away from the airport, all the way in, so they're safe there, all the way back and settled into the US? We're going to hear about different things. I think of this whole process is what I call a value chain, and I'm using business speak to actually deal with a situation that, is really, really tenuous. But the idea is, Andrew Gardner's, I think, just joined us. And part of what we'll do is we'll actually hear a little bit of the story about what he had said when he called me up at 9:30 one night saying, hey, Kevin, we need help. We need help. And this is where we need help. And he's got some stories about what did happen. Now, there's more than just this one situation, right? There are El Salvadorians, and you know that I was in El Salvador 3 weeks ago. There's Hondurans and Guatemalans that are getting stuck at the US-Mexico border, and they're in some of the roughest conditions that I could possibly imagine. I actually saw it firsthand when I was in Juarez the last 2 times I was there. So we're not just having a conversation about Afghanis, but I think there's a very specific, interesting story that is very sharp based on what's happening in Kabul, based on what's happening in Afghanistan. And I want to make sure that for everyone that's listening, I don't think we should just focus on this, but this is probably the sharpest situation to be looking at. So there's been some, beautiful stories that have been told, also some very hard to hear. There's the Marine sergeant that we see a picture of moments before her life was taken. And then, you see photos that we saw where babies are being handed across barbed wire like that, and really rough situation to see. When I made the call out, there's a bunch of different solutions that came to me and that I handed off to other people. And part of what we're really looking for is, if you imagine that I personally am the connector that's going to connect all this sort of stuff, and TechRanch is going to be the vessel that helps a lot of different pieces happen. This is where innovation can play its part. This is where, technology entrepreneurs on one side and people who actually know the hard situations can actually make things happen. And we're already seeing this in the more general news. I kind of love seeing this, that it's taking on more general news, because it just means that, new technologies are going to enter the market at the underserved, or the unserved, and they're going to actually benefit all of us. So for today, we have a number of different people. Bobby Painter, who's the legal director of Austin Refugee Services. Doris Montero was a consul to Pakistan from the Dominican Republic. She's also an immigration expert. She can talk a lot about the different situations that can be seen from the diplomat point of view. Andrew Gardner is a innovation specialist. He's the guy who called me up, a couple of Monday nights ago and said, "Hey, Kevin, we got a really rough situation. I know that you're an innovation guy, blah, blah, blah." We're going to hear from David Potes, although David is the one who told me, "Hey, I have to go pick up my son at the school. Something's happened." David's in Mexico. He's built the AVA virtual hospital. We'll hear a little bit more. Joe Payton is an entrepreneur based out of Dallas, Texas. He's an advocate for a bunch of Afghani families. And he had posted on Facebook saying, "Hey, I've got this one family that we just snuck across the border. Could you actually help out from that standpoint?" And then Heather is an analyst and a Farsi speaker. She also was quoted in a couple of special, like in Foreign Policy magazine, about mental health. And I said, "Hey, that person knows something specific." And there will be more things that are going to happen that we'll talk about mental health specifically because of my connections with the University of Texas at Austin and a few other pieces, the Texas Global Health Security Initiative. That'll be a future conversation that will go really deep on mental health, but I asked her to be here as well. So today, really what we're here to do is have a discussion. I don't have like a formal, you have to do it the following way kind of thing. Hopefully y'all saw my screen. I did not see if that actually did not go through. You did not. That's terrible. Okay, well, one of the terrible things about me not having my setup and not having my normal assistant on with us is you didn't see any of those slides. So that's embarrassing. But well, I tell you what, let's go ahead and go straight to the conversation.
Good thing you're such a beautiful person, Kevin.
That's funny. Hey, thank you, Andrew. So Andrew, you called me up the other night and you said, "Hey, the following situation has happened. Could you actually just give us like a very quick, few word sentence about who you are and then what happened?" So that actually lays kind of the groundwork for what we're talking about.
I'm a CEO of a company called Reese Technologies. We're a digitally we're an analytically minded solution consulting firm, deal primarily with the federal government. We started, as two civilians, my partner Tom and I, get engaged with COVID, went to the CDC as we developed very early models and found really quickly that our models were much more accurate than theirs. And that they asked, "How do we get to you?" And we said, "Well, I don't know. What does it even mean?" We had no experience working with the federal government. We were just people there to help. And so I think that's become the impetus for our business. We since have grown our federal data science consulting services with the Department of Homeland Security and with the Office of Personnel Management and the Treasury, as well as doing innovation with the Air Force. What's neat about it is we really developed deep relationships with a lot of the innovation folks within the Air Force. And what we learned, especially working with the federal government, is that the innovation projects you try to do may or may not turn out in the moment the way you want them to do, but the relationships you build, your ability to do that contracting, your ability to be responsive to their need in the true moment of need is what's powerful. So when we watched Afghanistan fall apart, I watched this whole bubbly innovation circle of folks that I was involved with go completely dark for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Reached out to all my people across the board, majors, colonels, all throughout the special operating world, and just watch these people sort of mourn that and just watch what they had invested in, people that they loved and cared about, just driven to dust, just broken people. And so I watched them about Tuesday, Wednesday, all of a sudden this organic activity, this kind of floundering, we should be doing something activity started happening, saying, "What can I do?" And there was a group of about 10 folks that formed this AFG expatriation group. They had a Slack channel, had Google documents set up to sort of capture names of their translators, interpreters, their TERPs as they call them, as well as AMCIS, the American citizens that they knew had connections with over in Afghanistan. And so here was just literally an organic citizen-driven activity people frankly acting outside of the chain of command and doing the best that they could with what they had. And so because I had developed, established this network with them, I said, hey, who can I bring that I know? Who can I bring to bring some order from a data science standpoint, some experience from, yes, you drop bombs, put bombs on target, but like, let me bring in somebody that actually understands refugee situations. And so I reached out to a spectrum of folks in my, network, Kevin being one of them, who had experience in this space. And one other one who Kevin is also connected with, Annie Hardy from Cisco. So I think it's really important to recognize in that connecting sphere that sometimes where we get uber competitive in the, in the moment of developing our solutions or trying to market and position ourselves, when the shit hits the fan, you grab the people you trust and you grab the people that have, those capabilities, regardless if they're coming from a major corporation or from a non-for-profit, or they're just a, civically minded, good people individual. And ultimately what came down, we grew from, Annie Hardy brought all of the direction to this team. And so we organized from 10 people to a very directed initiative and grew in 12 days from 10 volunteers to 2,000 volunteers. We grew from 15 Afghani and US MSITs to a list of 13,800 Afghani refugees that we're still, the majority we're collaborating on evacuation efforts. And we were able to identify and work with the State Department to get approximately 1,200 American citizens out of Afghanistan. It was really fascinating to watch this as a purely civilian effort and to realize that everyone, there's certainly a fog of war aspect to it, but everyone had to bring what they could bring. So, we had to bring the heart. My partner, Tom, is a data scientist, PhD data scientist who also brings a significant, love for helping and guiding and supporting other people. And so he was very critical in the data science efforts, but supporting this activity. Had to bring the executors. Annie Hardy was really, amazing on that, to onboard Cisco to 500 or 600 people, like within 3 days, and just watching this machine happen organically was, it was something I'll never see in my life again, I'm sure, or hope at least. And then, bringing the connectors. So Kevin is someone that I reached out to specifically, said, hey, you know people that think this way. Who do you know? And that's, I think the neatest thing was, who do you grab? Who do you reach for when you're literally drowning? And I watched the people that I care about in the innovation, within the DoD, literally emotionally drowning, scrambling with anything. I thought, when it came down to it, who did I call? And so, that's, Kevin, take that as a well-earned compliment that of all people in my network, you're one of the first people that I called. What we watched that was actually really shocking was the emotional support not only needed to provide for as caseworkers working with Afghan, and AMSITs that were there in Afghanistan, the emotional support that they needed, but also the significant amount of emotional support that we needed. We would see families that had been 10 people on the list, all of a sudden go down to 5 people, all of a sudden go to 3 people. We'd see people that we know 2 days ago told us they had one, day of food. We'd see people that we said, we directed, you should go to this gate. And then all of a sudden, the bombing happened and people that didn't respond anymore. And, and this is just purely a citizen level engagement. So it was, I think I got this tremendous respect for America. So I see the United States as a geographically sovereign country, but the philosophy of America is actually much bigger than that. And, I saw that as much Americanism, citizenry come from Australians. And, I'm thinking about specific people that I worked on this project from folks all around the world willing to run 24/7 to do good. And I think that the most valuable asset that we have is our engaged citizenry's desire to do good, and they need to be empowered to do that. And so that takes the support, it takes systems, but engaging citizens, supporting and engaging with government, how we were able to go and get special forces, support and engagement for the project, actual formal recognition from the special operators, support from veterans groups, engagement with Pineapple Express, how we built trust, engagement with NGOs, realizing where we fit into this puzzle, where everybody else, where the handoff happened there. There was a role for the startup entrepreneurial minded person, and a significant role for the, huge, global enterprise in that place. And I think in the moment of need, there's more need than there are hands. And so you kind of drop the pretense of competition, and you're just grateful for anyone willing to chip in anything. But again, that anyone chipping in anything means that we can't all be the ones doing the service directly at the end. There's a lot of infrastructure needs and support there. One thing I wanted to point out that we've taken this was a scale up quick and also collapse quick type mentality. We engaged the academic communities, specifically Texas State's GIS program. They put a call out for students in their graduate program to get involved. We had about 20 students respond to get engaged, and took on the risk of, as they're doing this mapping, helping people find border crossings, that there was a seriousness to what they were doing. This wasn't just an academic project, but if you sent a mom up a hill, with her 3 kids, that she might not come back, and you don't want to be the contributing factor and the reason that she got stuck in a landslide.
Let me stop you and actually pick out a few things that I think are interesting to.
I got to tell you probably the best part of this whole story. So
sure, please.
We this was probably about Friday, a week after I introduced you, Kevin, to the project, and we were onboarding about 20 graduate students from Texas State, going through all their qualifications, been through 5 or 6 folks, and they're all great. 3rd year PhD, expertise in ArcGIS, what have you. And we had a special operator, 10 tour in Afghanistan, guy that had climbed up every hill in Afghanistan, big old beard, great guy. And he just stops us all and says, there's no way you guys are going to be successful. Like, you can't just read a map and tell people to climb up a trail. And he says, what you really need to do ultimately, if you want to have any chance of success, is you need to use satellite imagery to find goat trails. So goat trails. And he's like, that's the only way I can see you even having a chance of success at this. And lo and behold, the next GIS student that chirps in, I think his name is Ahmedan Hussein. He says, I'm a 3rd year PhD student in geomorphic hazards. So I look at landslides and satellite imagery. And it just so happens I came here as a refugee, and before I came here as a refugee to Texas, I was in Sudan as a goat herder. And it was like, all of a sudden this special forces guy has this deep bond. And from that point on, anybody else that talked had to give some goat qualified reason that they could be involved in the project. And to me, it was the most patriotic moment of my life. And so they call our engagement the Digital Dunkirk, and we were one of the 3 primary project teams, along with Team America, Pineapple Express, and there were 2 other groups that we ultimately combined with. But you really, I've never experienced a level of patriotism for my country at any, flag waving event that I experienced, hearing the Sudanese goat herder step up and take the call. And we do a great service to the people that we're serving. But in a time and age when people are seeing more catastrophes than ever, and they're being asked to go and Netflix and chill and wait for it to go over, providing an empowered citizenry the opportunity to be a part of the solution is as important, believe it or not, as to their mental well-being and health as the service you're rendering to the refugee. And so it's so bidirectional in that way, that I just really would, that's my one takeaway, is there's literally 1,000 people in this project that have never engaged with the military, that had no idea what all these acronyms and terms meant. But when it came and they were called to serve, stepped up. And I think that as a result, I would believe that as we go on these, additional activities of reestablishing these Afghan families and other refugee families across the world, that the level of desire that's out there among the lay citizenry to help, more than just donate $1, but to do something and be part of the solution is stronger than I think we can ever imagine. And they all bring stories like that, Sudanese goat herder that, where in the world would you get that? So Kevin, I'll back to you. Oh, by the way, that team that we put together for Afghanistan, we have been using them, the GIS students, over the weekend for a 500-person crowdsource project with the Civil Air Patrol and FEMA to do mapping tagging on all of the disaster response for Hurricane Ida. We're getting tagging on those houses faster than FEMA has ever had identification of damage. So, we can keep rolling with this thing. So,
Andrew, you're making my point totally, right? This whole idea that most of the people, the beautiful story about talking about goat trails, right? We should do this hashtag goat trails, right? Is I think the biggest thing that people don't generally recognize is the world has changed. And what you're talking about right now is that it's because the world's changed. Most people don't know the world's changed. Most people don't know that you can get 20 students at Texas State to find goat trails and save people's lives. And the best part about it is they probably were sitting in their shorts and a t-shirt having a latte when they're doing that, and they're saving lives from just like finding goat trails, right? The thing that the fusion of what you just said is beautiful, because it makes the point without even having to go to everyone else. But I want to actually make sure that we get to hear from everyone else, because the thing about it is this is exactly what we're here for, right? This is exactly what we're here for, is just recognizing. One of the things that's always driven me crazy is a super connector, right? I've now been in 24 countries around the world. I've spoken in 27 cities in Mexico alone. Is to see that, oh wait, this group of people right here need to talk to this group of people right here. I've got another story that has South Australian technology that's being used in Ethiopia, and it's saving people's lives around a disease called leishmaniasis. But the biggest barrier is people believe, oh wait, I just have to throw more money, or there's something else, right? They can't imagine that the solution was there. So Andrew made the point. What I'd like to do is I'd like to have others follow in and say, each one of you I know has a story to actually share about saying, hey, this is the part that I actually see. It could be the problem set, it could be the solution set. Like as an example, Bobby runs an organization in Austin that's about refugee settlement. Now, earlier I talked about there's this whole value chain. What is a value chain? Instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to solve a healthcare problem, or I'm going to solve a mental health problem, or I'm going to solve some other problem, we actually can start lining up people and solutions across the whole way. Bobby, will you say something about what you guys do in Austin with regards to refugees and on the other end of the spectrum?
Yeah,
like the helping people settle.
So I do want to clarify. I'm not the legal director of Austin Refugee Services. I think there was some confusion there. I'm not. I'm the legal director of American Gateways, which is an immigration legal services provider based in Austin. So we do not do refugee resettlement, and we don't work internationally. What we do work on is helping folks who are here in the U.S. go through the asylum application process, whether that involves working affirmatively with U.S. Citizenship Immigration Services or working before the immigration courts. We operate at a number of detention centers in Central Texas, dealing with people who have recently entered the country who were detained prior to kind of engaging with the asylum process. So, like I said, we're a nonprofit. All of our clients are at or below 200% of poverty. Most of them are in Central Texas, and they come from all over the world, including Afghanistan. What I think I can still bring to this discussion is just information for all of you, sort of about the legal and institutional framework that governs our refugee protection scheme. I can speak generally to the refugee resettlement process, sort of the steps that happen along the way, as well as the asylum application process, how they differ, how they're similar, some of the other immigration processes that Afghans are now using to come to the United States. And I can talk a little bit about the specific vulnerabilities we see for folks here in our region no matter whether they were resettled formally through an agency or whether they showed up here just on a visitor's visa, like a lot of our clients, and then realized they couldn't go home because there's no home to go to anymore. So I think if people have questions about specific aspects of that, I'm happy to answer them, or I can talk briefly sort of about what we in the immigration lawyer world mean when we say refugee versus what the population as a whole tends to mean when they say refugee, and why that's an important distinction.
I think one of the things that would be most interesting, given both our active conversation right now with the people that are present, as well as the ones who will see this video, is are there specific needs that you would say, wow, this is just, I mean, to get involved in that kind of work, your heart's in the game, right? And there's stuff that you're saying, hey, this is still where there's crisis and there's suffering that shouldn't exist. What is there anything that you'd like to actually say? Because part of what I'd like to do from an innovation standpoint is to, I call it expose the edges. As an example, Andrew called up me the other day and he exposed the edges, and I had a couple ideas and a few people to add, and it's because he exposed the edges. Could you expose a few edges about where we could actually lower suffering through just some of what this network might represent?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from our perspective, because we're working primarily with people trying to work through their immigration process here in the US, the problem that we routinely see is just the lack of a formal support structure for folks who are going through an immigration process that can often take years or sometimes even decades to conclude. So one of the important distinctions that comes up a lot in the immigration world is folks who enter the country as refugees, meaning they went through a resettlement process that was initiated abroad. They tend to enter the country with the support of a refugee resettlement agency like Refugee Services of Texas or Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. And at least for those first 3 months that they're here, they're getting some kind of basic orientation on that includes English language classes and apartment or housing and job support. And that's all great, but that eventually runs out. For a lot of our clients, they're showing up, for instance, the Afghan client I represent right now, they showed up on a visitor's visa because they got a death threat a year ago and said, I got to go now. So they came to the US with nothing, relied on a family member for support for a little while, but there were 3 kids with them. And because they're not formally classified as a refugee yet, they're still going through that application process here in the US, they're not entitled to any sort of public support. And they, for at least a fairly long chunk of time, are ineligible to work. They have to rely completely on informal support networks to sustain themselves. And that can be really, really taxing for people who already have suffered significant home country. We're talking about torture survivors, people who've lost family members, people who have received death threats. So, and our immigration lawyers do our best to make those resources available. We're there to help them with their immigration case, but if we know about a housing network that they can tap into or an employment network that they can tap into informally or something like that, we'll provide it. But we've always struggled to have kind of a comprehensive place for people who may not be able to access support through formal networks because of their immigration status, to kind of go down the list and say, here's where I can get information about housing. Here's where I can get information about food. Here's where I can look for we can't advise people to work without authorization, but here's where I can go to see if I can find ways to get a little financial support while I'm working through my work permit process. Counseling is a big one. Connecting with networks of other people who came before, who now have status, who can provide that support. So I think that's a long-winded way of saying, I think that what we see when we do the immigration case is that there's a whole lot more going on in the lives of our clients than what we can handle on our own. And there's not really any structure that unifies all of their other needs and allows them to tap into that in a really coherent way.
That's interesting, because that ties directly into the idea that for our entrepreneurs that see this program, part of what I want to make sure I do is I can see how we can plug in. Well, one of the problems with big business is big business can't move very fast. And one of the visual metaphors I try to explain to the network what I see that we are, right? If you want to take on the whales and the sharks of the world, if you have a school of piranhas, you can do some pretty interesting damage in a very short period of time. Okay, what does that mean with this? We could actually, I'm imagining that one of the things that can emerge from this, and we'll hear from a couple of other entrepreneurs and a little bit about this specifically, is to have a framework that can plug in, hey, here's all these different solutions. David, I'm going to signal that I want to make sure that I get you to say something about that. Kim's raising his hand. Doris, in just a second, I want you to frame in the part of being, on the ground in Pakistan or where the other countries where you've worked with this specifically. Kim, why don't you go ahead?
One thing, Kevin. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Just after this activity, we've been reached out to by numerous groups within the military, including AFWorks, this is kind of innovation group within the Air Force, to look at building a platform, like an open source platform to support, these types of organic behaviors. So as we're talking about this, I'm sketching down all of the thoughts in mind of, like, if you built an open source tool that any group could grab and organize and deploy, in kind of create the security that they need, like what would need to be included in that kind of a tool. So your experiences are all, there's things we can do with that, and there's interest at supporting that. So
yeah, well, and Andrew, I want to make sure that everyone understands the seriousness of the conversation, and you're actually lining it up. The thing I was going to say is, just so you know, since the U.S. Army Futures Command is in Austin, Texas, at a not too long ago a happy hour, after I'd had a couple of my favorite tequila drinks, I went to the general who's in charge of running that, and I said, you know what? You need to tap the Austin, and not just the Austin, but since I represent a lot of the Austin technology, entrepreneurial community, you need to tap us, because peacemaking is something we know how to do. You got the war fighters, and then you got your peacemakers, right? And if you spend more money on peacemaking, you don't have to do as much of this other stuff. So it's a good thing. So Andrew, the answer is yes. And I think what's going to come out of this on one of the channels on our social network is we're going to interact, and I want to make sure that people know the seriousness of this. Kim, go right ahead.
Yeah, so Bobby, implicit in your comment, and just looking for clarification, Carol is on, and that's how we got to Bobby, but she's familiar with one religious organization that actually is, sheltering somebody. But implicit in your comment is there's a defined path, and then there's in the shadows path. Am I getting that right? So if somebody hasn't, and there are different needs, and so the question is, if you're in the undefined path, how does that? You rightly said I can't recommend you go get work without a visa. Define the undefined path and that world, and how difficult it is to work with if we tried to organize something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So what the people who would kind of fall into that undefined path are what we would call asylum seekers. So they're generally people who come to the United States either on a visa, or they cross the border without inspection, or they presented themselves at a point of entry, usually on the southern border, and been paroled into the United States pending some sort of adjudicated process where they can actually get status. Our system is so backed up and so dysfunctional that timeline, once they enter into that system and process, can take a very, very long time. And for large chunks of that time, they're not eligible for work authorization. Eventually they will be, hopefully. But even then, they're certainly not eligible to access any sort of public benefits program, like a Medicaid or SNAP or anything like that, or most public housing opportunities. So that leaves them kind of in this limbo where there's a formal path insofar as there's a way to try to obtain immigration status, but how to do everything else is kind of ambiguous. And I can speak to that part of it, not so much with my lawyer hat on, but as my social services worker hat on. There are, like in Austin, for instance, there are a number of great resources, including some shelters here that focus primarily on housing refugees and people who are in the asylum process. And they really have become quite adept at navigating this world where you might not be able to, for instance, find a job where you are able to, the employer is able to fill out an I-9 and get you, pull up a social security number and all of that, but you might be providing childcare, or you might be doing cleaning work or something like that. And it allows, the applicant to have some source of income, usually cash, for the period of time while they're waiting to get a work permit, because once they get the work permit, they can get a social and they have access to a wider range of jobs that might take better advantage of their skills. We're also talking about finding childcare for people who might not know how to access, the daycare networks, or, they can't put their kids on a waiting list. They know how to get people connected with a great program in Austin here called MAP, which is like the Medical Access Program, which provides sort of basic healthcare to people who are completely off the grid otherwise in terms of their status and couldn't be eligible for benefits. Helping kids who maybe were born in the US who are entitled to benefits because of their citizenship kind of get health insurance for themselves. So there's a lot of kind of nitty gritty ad hoc work that has to be done based on every individual situation, that happens at the level of individual congregations. It happens at the level of individual homeless shelters, interfaith networks, other nonprofits. That is, and we talk to each other pretty well here, but it's not always sort of organized in one spot where I could give a client who comes through my door like an online resource to say, hey, here's where you can go address all of your other needs, and they'll kind of help you figure out how to do that based on the fact that you are currently without status.
Yeah, and so I want to make sure I interrupt just really quick, because there's some follow-on stuff on that I know we need to go deeper on. But again, I want a presence for the overall network. And I haven't booked the speaker yet, but there is someone else that actually I think might be able to provide a different picture about that's going to be coming. So let me just pause that on hold. Doris, I want to hear from you. Shelby, I want to hear from you. And then David, I want to hear from you. Why don't we go in that direction as well? We're going to end up going over just a little bit, it looks like, time-wise, but I know I want to be really sensitive to the hour that we have together. So I want to hear your other voices. Doris, you have a perspective on this, both being in country as well as working with the immigration process. What would you like to share?
Thank you so much for the invitation to being here, Kevin. While I hear out all the initiatives that you guys are undertaking, and I find them fantastic, I really admire the sense of the awareness of the Americans and how much they want to really help communities, vulnerable communities around the world. However, I'm more concerned not with the people that you have extracted from Afghanistan. I'm really burned and very concerned for the people left behind. I feel that hundreds of thousands of people will be making that run for Pakistan or for Iran in the following months, okay? I saw it many years ago when I was in Pakistan. It was right after the war with the Russians. So in those days, I lived in a village in the north, NWFP was called, now it's called something else, Pashtun Kua or something like that. That's the border, that's the province that borders with Afghanistan. So basically it's the same race, the Pashtun, divided by the geographical line. So they are the same people, they speak the same language, and in times of trouble, all those Pashtun from Afghanistan will travel down to Pakistan on the north. And there is a pandemic, it's, there will be diseases, there is no job, obviously. In the winter, it's really cold. And those refugee camps are not equipped for anything. And the help is not given in a very systematic way. The Pakistani government will hardly interfere. So basically, these people are left to themselves and to the kindness of the fellow Pashtun in Pakistan. So this is something that maybe in a bigger picture we should be addressing at some point, and I would like to be involved in that, okay? I know friends, I was married to a Pashtun, I speak a little bit of Pashto, and I really feel for the Afghanis in all that tribal areas. So I don't know what we can do, but we have to also think in bigger terms, in a bigger scope, and look towards something to do in the future for the Afghanis coming into Pakistan.
Yeah, one of the beautiful things about now, there are specific geographies, specific targets and stuff like that. But obviously, myself as a software guy, one of the things, you solve a problem once and then you can apply a lot of different things to it, right? And create ways of plugging things in. I want to make sure that we keep that presence of mind to think about the vulnerable, obviously, after the Russian Afghani war, now after the American Afghani war, we should be thinking of what we already know is going to happen. It's just a matter of there are going to be people that are going to continue to get displaced, that continue to get killed. And so, that is a very important thing about how to pull them out of harm's way.
Yes, technology can do wonders, maybe through a phone, maybe through internet, they can have access to the world and feel that they are not alone. Okay, this is one of the things that I feel that could be done. I don't know how, but if you are willing to look into that, you count with my cooperation. Okay, I know a lot of people in Pakistan. I know a lot of Pashtuns. I lived there for a year, in that province, so I know how things work. So whatever I can do, obviously, I'm willing to, okay? But
that's perfect.
more so not for the ones in the States. I think they're in safe hands. Eventually they'll be safe. They will integrate. My concern is more for the ones left behind.
Understood. Well, certainly. And David Potes, I'd like you to give an example so that people see the visualization about how is it that we can actually help these people out from 1 million miles away, actually about 10,000 miles away. Like you've got an example about that. David's out of Monterrey, Mexico, and is one of our entrepreneurs that was in the innovation bridge between Austin and Mexico in 2019. David, take it from here. Tell us about what you're up to and how you could impact the vulnerable in a positive way around the world.
Sure. Thank you, Kevin. So long story short, what we are basically doing, I've been in the healthcare sector for almost 10 years now. And we recently I'm the CEO of a company called Apollo Health. We're based out here in Monterrey, Mexico. That for those of you who don't know, is the second largest city in Mexico, just 2-hour drive from the border of the US. And so basically, what we've been working in the last year is to create a virtual healthcare center. And we are integrating this virtual healthcare center, with a group of hospitals, the largest group of hospitals here in Mexico, private hospitals. There are 49 hospitals practically going from across the country, from Tijuana to Cancun. And our goal is to create this integral ecosystem of care access. That's something that is not very common here in Mexico. And going all the way through how can we create a better experience and better patient engagement and journey concerning chronic diseases and concerning home care. Of course, if you need to go to the hospital, to have the network of hospitals working with us, right? So just to give a very brief context about that, and what Kevin was referring to is that talking to him about potential opportunities for this virtual care centers, we came up basically he came up with the idea of how can we implement this this infrastructure that we already creating here in Mexico through virtual healthcare services to help Hispanic immigrants in the U.S. So this is something that we are still working on how to implement this, like I said, for immigrants, and how can we, talking about regulations and things like that. But because of that, we are now in the process of creating this new nonprofit to help immigrants, Hispanic immigrants, because of the nature of our infrastructure, that are Spanish speaking medical specialists, to offer basic healthcare services in terms of orientation. How can they can have basic access to certain levels of just guidance and what to do, what not to do for healthcare services. And of course, there's a lot that we can expand to in terms of there's a whole market for medical tourism, and getting healthcare services here in Mexico and things like that. But that's something that we're exploring into. And Kevin, I don't know if you need me to talk any more specifics about one of this.
For right now, I think you gave the taste of what, because I think if if we can see that you have 49 hospitals already with a virtual, virtual care model on top of that you're able to offer across Mexico that then can come into the United States for immigrants, I think it's easy to see how that same digital support could go all the way to Afghanis. The key thing is, as we discussed in 2 weeks ago on the same program, how is it that we get, phones, this is a fairly expensive iPhone. How is it we get phones into the hands of the ones that need it? And one of the, just as a reminder, just so everyone can see what I see, as a reminder, we actually had Joel Odd come talk about a phone that was built in Nigeria that actually is being used in different places. He's gotten a bunch of them and taken them to Jamaica to deal with some of the issues that are happening in Jamaica as a platform. So the platform is there. The platform is there. The way I always say this is, all the world's problems have already been solved. It's just a matter of connecting the entrepreneur with the solution to the market with the problem. The platform is there. I can imagine that, same type of thing about how we extend care into Afghanis, because a lot of money is going to get spent. Let's just make sure that the money is spent in meaningful ways. So that's what we're pointing at. David, that was perfect. Shelby, you actually had posted back a while ago about, let's bring this back to the States for just a second. I want to make sure that if you could just say a couple minutes about what you were saying, because part of the settling process is finding jobs, and you have an opinion about that. You said something in the chat session about it. Could you just give us like another frame? So, because I want people to see this whole, like in this random group of people that we've assembled, here we have the full value chain. Shelby, say something about that.
So, specifically talking about the undocumented immigrants coming in that don't have a clear path to, getting their work visa. So a very common thing that's done inside the trade is you'll have someone undocumented go file a foreign corporation domestically in the United States. You can do it in pretty much any state. And then at that point, you 1099 them. Now you've got labor on the ground. They're making money. They're paying taxes. And it's a win-win for everyone. And with the continuing labor shortages from within the trade, this is going to be a path that is more and more accepted because you can't automate heating, plumbing, AC, garage doors, or any of the other things. As of this point, garage doors are probably 25 to 30 years out from being automated for installation and repair.
That's perfect. So with the thing that we actually see in one of our other startups in Tech Ranch, we saw the same thing. In the construction trades that don't have enough people available to them right now, they recognize that immigrants are the muscle that's actually really driving that. In fact, Fidelity Technology is the name of the company that has the training platform for delivering training over a phone. And by, you can deliver the training over the phone to the individual in question. And really there are 3 different points of, training, just to show you how simple it is. You can actually focus on building the base, the base of the house, the windows, and the roof. Everything else was easy to trade, to train around, but that sort of stuff is there. Again, that's another example. We'll have the Fidelity Tech people come back. We're coming to the end of the time that we normally have. I want to make sure that we've started, whetting the appetite of the world that I see, because I knew almost everyone that's on today before this call, and I think you're starting to see what I see. Anyone want to make a reflection or two? Heather, you just came off of mute. Please share with us.
Yeah, so just one thing that I wanted to make sure that we're all conscious about when we're having these discussions, and that's including the voice of the refugees, because we all have our own problem sets and problems that we want to solve on their behalf, but we need to make sure that we know exactly what are the most pressing problems for them, for us to solve on their behalf. So just that.
Yeah, no, totally. In fact, if there was a way that if anyone would like to, I didn't want to put, I have several friends in Austin that work with refugees. I've met some of the historical Afghani refugees that have come to Austin. if there is someone that actually would like to actually as a representative of, or at least, an individual who can say, hey, this is what I went through. Because of the work my father has done with Spanish-speaking refugees and some of the stuff that we heard from Bobby earlier today, I've seen that firsthand. My dad was in the Peace Corps before I was born, and so I grew up with seeing him work with especially Spanish-speaking ones that were up against really ugly situations, getting thrown in a detention center in Taylor, Texas, and having no recourse for when they're going to come out. Kind of the stuff that Bobby alluded to. I would love to actually have someone or a group and be a part of the information that is more widely shared. And we can leverage this program for part of that, because I think this idea of, now that we have real visible examples of innovating the vulnerable out of harm's way, there's a way that just with a little bit of experience, we can help people find the goat trails to solving some of that, solving some of these problems that are meaningful to each one of them. I know we're coming to the end, because I'm getting messages from people saying, hey, I need to go ahead and step off. What I'm going to try to do this time is I'm actually going to really try to share my my slide presentation. You have evidence that I actually really had one. Sorry for earlier about not having us be able to go through it. And what I'll ask is, I'm going to ask Sydney to, in the final cut of this, to go ahead and she'll splice the slides in with my preamble for what our discussion was. But this has been beautiful from the standpoint of the insight that's been shared. So we've discussed this. To go from here, join the community for free at techranch.mn.co. We're going to change the URL at some point, but this is the URL that we're using right now. You can join the community for free. Like I said, if you're an entrepreneur looking for solutions to building out your company, we do have a modest first step fee for gaining access to our Venture Essentials program and things like that. The pricing for US-based customers, we are trying to do it in a sliding scale around the world, but the pricing for US-based customers to gain that to that next level, just as a side note, not to be too much of a commercial, is $90 a month. That being said, we'll definitely work with you. But if you want to discuss this further, I want to make sure that everyone that spoke today, please join us. Please join us at this site. If you have problems getting on it, you're more than welcome to actually reach out to me directly. And we'll start a channel called, #vulnerable. And we'll have a corresponding Slack channel as well. That I would like to make sure that this is such a beautiful expression of what our efforts together can make a big difference in. And with that, it's an honor to get to work with entrepreneurs that are driven by vision and values. And I'm real excited because, like Andrew said at the very beginning, just a little bit of effort helped these individuals find the goat trails that actually quite literally save people's lives. Like, no question about it. That's a beautiful example. I'll make sure that some of the segments of this video, which will be posted later today, but we'll update it again so that we fix some of the slides that didn't come through. I really want you to get that by just tying a few entrepreneurs around the world, that we really can make a difference. Today, we had entrepreneurs represented in the United States, the Dominican Republic. Let's see, I saw Nigerians on with us. I saw Mexicans on with us. I know that we have a couple of different countries in Europe that have been represented as well. Egypt was in the house today as well. When you really get what already happened with the people that are here, and then there's going to be the multiple effect of the video itself, we truly can go change the world for the better together. So with that, I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. Let's go change the world for the better together. Y'all take good care. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.